And even though the creator is a straight male, 80% of the writers were women. 3 of our writers were gay or just non-identifying for cis norm. And it was so well fleshed out. The writing was far superior to most cartoons I work on because Sean went above and beyond to really bring in different writers.
Where can our audience find that?
Visticons, I believe, is available on Amazon Prime. I think you can get the entire 40 episodes now. It was on Nickelodeon. I think they pushed us to Nicktoons or something. It may not be dead, like we are trying to find a new home.
If you all go home and click on it and watch it.
There was an example of one thing that was happening. So I just want to finish the Mysticon thing. We have 2 characters on it. It was a love story, 2 female characters. And the second to last episode, they were supposed to kiss. We recorded the episode that way. We all cried when we read the scripts. We were so happy that they were brave enough to put this in a cartoon. It was a beautiful relationship. There was nothing gratuitous about it. It was just that final moment. It's like, I've always loved you. I know. And they kiss, and she goes off to save the realm. And the toy company killed it. They said, we cannot show the kiss. People won't, the Donald Trump people won't buy the toys. If we show this, we won't do it. So they didn't show the kiss. They still say, I love you, and they hug. But it was a kick, like, I've never felt so gutted on a show, honestly.
Our last short film that we just did, Dominic, he wrote it. And so basically a little girl who has a monster in her closet, and then the dad comes into the room to kind of like comfort her. Well, then you have a side scene where we go and we see the parents, and we were like, what if they were dads? And it was just that simple change that just really made an impact for the whole thing. Not only that, but also it changes the whole context of the entire story. And when we were shooting it, one of the actors were just like, well, how are we gonna do this? Are we gonna be like stereotypical? Like, do you want me to talk about the list? And we're like, no, God, no. We want you to be absolutely natural, completely normal, just be yourself. And I think, I have a friend who's gay, and he watched it, and he was just like, that was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and thank you for representing us that way. And he was just like, and so it was just, so yeah, I do think that there are people, who we do need writers to represent, an underrepresented class of people, but also it's just people who don't identify that way, if they just approach it from just how they would be, it doesn't have to be, it can just be normal and natural, and I think that's the best way to approach it. Just treat them like normal, anybody else.
Yeah, I think it's always just making sure you have good characters first, and not defining them by their sexuality or their race or whatever these things are that we kind of, as people, we put labels on people, but always making sure the actual character is strong, the character's there. And for me, when I do a lot of story editing, so I run writers' rooms for animated shows, I always make sure we have a very diverse writers' room going into it. I've been the only girl in a lot of writers' room, and that sucks. So it's really about finding a diverse group of writers to begin with, and then just making sure you're treating the characters as human beings first, and really bringing that there. So that's inclusivity has had a huge thing for me in everything I do. I have a bunch of shows in development right now that has very diverse, inclusive casts, not only on sexuality and race, but disabilities is a big thing for me as well. My older brother has Down syndrome. You never see that in television. You never see that portrayed. So it's a huge thing for me to make sure that those things are portrayed. And people, the reason I got into this industry was because when I was a kid, I could watch cartoons and not feel alone. And that's what I want to give back to people. So that's a really important thing, is people seeing themselves represented on screen.
I'd like to point out to just some of the audience, we've got a lot of kids here. What kind of questions do you guys have? I want a question from some of my front row people here that are all young. I want to know what Wonder Woman came here wanting to know today. What are some of your questions about these ladies and maybe you're looking to have something in this career field yourself. I'm sure that we've got at least 1 or 2 people who draw in the room, 1 or 2 people who write. What kind of questions do you guys have about how they pursued this as a career?
How do you guys deal with like artist block?
Keeping the creativity flowing.
Exercise. I think your brain it needs blood. So I think getting out and doing something different for a little while and something that takes a lot of different kind of mental energy. Sometimes I also draw or do something that because I absolutely don't draw professionally. I like to do things I do puzzles. There's a while where I was so busy and occasionally I would do a puzzle because it's so visual and my brain is always in like words, and I just had to have a break. So sometimes your brain needs rest. Give it 30 minutes an hour.
You also can't sit down. Oh, sorry. Oh, you're fine. I think too for just getting out of your rut, because I've been in that like many times, and I get out of it by like I think even just going up and doing an open mic at stand up. Like it's once you let yourself go, and then people are laughing, you get this like adrenaline going, and you're like that carries on to my next project, because I feel like even just getting a compliment from somebody on something that you've never even done before is like, it feels really good, and that like carries me through the next 3 weeks where I'm like, yeah, I can do anything. I did that. I flipped an egg. I fell down the stairs and I still have all my teeth. Stuff like that. Like it's so crazy. I mean, that's like what she said is so true. Like her hair inspired me. I've never seen her hair, and I want to paint, a Pink Panther now. I'm gonna change. I think I'll just wash this off really quick.
So 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah, see you soon.
When I was in art school, I went straight out of high school to art school. So I started art school when I was 17. I was already working in comics for some independent comics places, and then I was just drawing. The best thing I've ever done that gets over a lot of stuff is I took classes at Second City Training Center. I took improv classes. That's getting up on stage, creating something out of nothing based on suggestions from the audience. Okay, people find that terrifying. It also is a good way of getting over any kind of public speaking problem. But one of the things that you have to do when you're creating a scene is you say to the audience, I need a who, a what, and a where. Okay, so what I've told my students, because I teach comic book storytelling, at one point I put a bunch of nouns in a hat, a bunch of like active verbs or other types of words, and a bunch of locations in a hat. And I had each one pull one out, and that's what they have to write a story about. Because the most terrifying thing that people have is like, oh, how do I get over writer's block? How do I get over artist block? What do I do? What do I draw? How do I make the best comic ever? You don't make the best comic ever or best story ever starting out. It might become the best thing, but you need to take the pressure off that blank page or that blank computer screen. So if you suddenly find out that there's, a vampire riding a bicycle on the moon, then it's like, well, why are they there? How did they get there? What does that look like? What kind of bicycle would a vampire ride? Oh, I bet it would be very kind of Addams Family-ish or not, or maybe he's this kind of vampire. And you start having questions that you answer yourself, and it takes away the terrifying finality of best comic on this paper ever. And then stuff grows out of that.
When I do writer's rooms, I always at the beginning of a season we'll put names of titles of possible episodes in an envelope and pull them out and give everybody 2 minutes to come up with a premise for that title. And
That's
people
fun.
who like stress days over a premise, like it's very high stress sometimes in these places. And they'll like, every sentence has to be perfect. I'm like, no, you have 2 minutes, write a premise. Like that's
Don't
it.
you find that the ones where they're meticulously freaking out about it are the ones that are lackluster?
Yeah.
Because they have no heart or soul because it's
It's
so
over
much-
refined. Like
Yeah, they're like, but it has to be this, and it's exactly this size and this page, and I've made sure it has this adjective in it, and it's supposed to be exciting. And oh, everything you just said is the least exciting thing. Just how you described how you did it is like, oh, I'm so drained.
Yeah, I think even for myself, I'll give myself like, all right, you have to write 5 pages before noon or something. And just, you have to do it no matter if it's good or not. Just get something on the page, and then you can start editing and making it better.
We've only got a few minutes left, so I want to make sure, does anybody have any questions that they've been holding on to? Otherwise, yeah? Stand up so we can hear you.
Well, I was kind of thinking like the body art thing, and like, why don't you go into that? Like, how do you get like cheap things?
So yeah, what's a good economical base of tools for the body art?
The water-based paints, I use a lot of Mayron Paradise. They're fairly cheap. You can get them from like $9, depending on the really pretty colors, are like $12. But to start, you can get those water-based and just practice. Also, if you want, you can just start practicing watercolor just on paper, because it's very similar. I mean, you're just putting it on your body. Another thing too is a good way to start is I started working with a face painter, princess parties. I started doing that so I could kind of, she would give me supplies, and so I had a little starter kit, and it was just a lady that lived very close to me, but she'd been doing it for 30 years. So find someone maybe in your area that does face painting or princess parties, and just learning the basics of face painting and how quick, like, you got to do it. Bam, bam, like you just, it kind of forces you to just start going, and you don't want to, you don't want to overthink things, like they said, like you don't want to, you just got to keep going for it. But you can go on Mayron's website, and also you can get it for cheaper if you go to like conventions, and like for instance, the lady that I buy paints from, I used to work with, she goes to conventions and sells them there, so sometimes it's cheaper, but she would give me a discount when I worked for her, like $4 off of products because I worked for her. So that is a really good way to start, having someone show you the, the beginning ins and outs and everything, and learn how to get really quick. And it's just really fun. You should totally do it.
I'm not a body painter, but I'm going to suggest something based on your suggestion of watercolor paint. When I was in school, they taught you how to paint with a limited palette first. So first you started out with just black and white. Then you moved to a different color that you left black and white away, but you used one color, like maybe a sepia, to try and do something. I would say, because there's so many effects you can create with black and white, and learn how to do shading and tone, like it'll cost you a lot less to start out with one type of thing and then keep adding a color as you go along, because you can make some really effective things by just using a couple colors. And then you'll learn how to do your technique before you start really investing a lot of money, right? Yeah. How many colors you've got? Black, white, and then red and blue on you.
This blue is by Chameleon. It is called Ink. It is the best blue on the planet. It stretches out. Like, I've had one cake palette, or one cake of blue ink for an entire year, and I do a lot of body paint, and because it's almost like an ink pen when it spills and it's like really saturated. It's exactly that color, and you can stretch it out and mix it with a lot of colors. So another thing too is you can save money if you learn how to mix the colors right. Like if I don't have green, I'm fine because I have this blue and I have a little yellow. So I can make, you don't have to buy a million colors either. You have your top primaries and learn the...
Get that color wheel.
Yeah, learn the color wheel. It's like the best thing I ever learned, and that will really like help you out. And like I said, Inked by Chameleon is like this amazing royal blue, and it stretches out with anything. It's my favorite. I could cry, get excited.
Don't just cry! How many hours is that going to put that back? So just to wrap up, in this same room, following this panel, Joe will have the room to talk.